Welcome, all of you lovely people, to the When Women Lead panel. It's incredible to see so many familiar faces. Thanks, friends, for being here. And for those of you who I don't know, hi. I'm Jen GURECKI. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Coalition Snow, and we make women's skis and snowboards that don't suck. I am thrilled to be able to co-facilitate this panel with Amanda, and I'll allow her to introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Amanda GOAD, co-founder of Bold Brew and Wild Women's Project, and we're a women's leadership summit for the outdoor industry that's just trying to have more of these conversations at a high country hut. And
I just want to make sure, humans in the back, can you hear us?
Yeah.
How's the volume? Is it good? Okay, thank you. If at any time you can't hear us, just let us know, because we're going to be saying some really important shit and everyone needs to hear it. So just tell us. I'm just saying. Good, okay. So why are we here today? We're here today because if anyone hasn't noticed, women are becoming a thing in the outdoor industry. I mean, we know we've all been here all along, like we've been here, but all of a sudden everyone's paying attention, it's a very, very exciting time for us, but also it can be a challenging time, and there's lots of conversations that we need to have, both as women, as humans. There's just a lot to talk about. So today we want to specifically talk about women and leadership and how women can really own their power and own that leadership in the industry. So before we dive into the questions, let's introduce our panelists. So we're going to start with Georgina Miranda here. I'm going to try to read this off my phone. Georgina Miranda is a purpose-driven and seasoned entrepreneur, adventurer, consultant, speaker, and activist. She is the founder and CEO of Altitude 7, an adventure lifestyle media platform that helps women adventurers and travelers discover the best outdoor and adventure travel stories, experiences, products, and inspiration. She is currently in the process of completing the Explorer Grand Slam to raise awareness around gender-based violence and climate change. Woo! Welcome, Georgina. Sitting next to her, we have Haley Robison, who currently serves as the CEO of Kamek, an Austin, Texas company that designs performance gear for elevated camping. Prior to joining Kamek, Haley's experience spanned work as a strategy consultant, wilderness instructor, curriculum designer, and theology student.
Yeah. And up next is Heather BALOGH Roquefort. Did I get that right?
Pretty good.
She is a writer in the outdoor industry, regularly contributes to Backpacker magazine, and recently published her first book, Backpacking 101. She founded her blog, justacoloradogal.com, in 2005, and is now the most widely read outdoor site for women in the state of Colorado.
And we have Jenny Vierling, who founded Tailwind Nutrition along with her husband Jeff in 2012. Prior to starting Tailwind, she was in the high-tech industry, establishing the product management and marketing departments at Mercury Payment Systems, which was later acquired by Vantiv. Her early years were spent at Microsoft, where she worked on MSN and was on the launch teams of Microsoft TechNet and the Microsoft Solution Provider Program.
Woo. Cool. And last but not least, we have Sado Sherpa Endolino. She's raised through the ranks starting in 2005 in customer service to now leading the company as Chief Operating Officer at Sherpa Adventure Gear. In her role, she is responsible for maintaining the unique brand story and heritage while continuing to grow the brand in an authentic and sustainable way. She believes that business is all about relationships and people.
Perfect. So we're going to get started with the questions. We will leave about 20 minutes at the end for Q&A from the audience. We also are going to do a giveaway today of some hats and some water bottles. We're going to pass the hat around in a bit, and you can drop your card in or your name, and you'll be entered to win this pair of Coalition Snow skis tomorrow when we have the workshop here at 3:30 p.m. You must be here if you want to win the skis. So
and a trip to Wild Women's Project.
And a trip to Wild Women's Project, yes. So Amanda, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, so To start with what Jen was talking about a little earlier, everyone's talking about women this year, right? REI is talking about force of nature, how Tessa is growing. So we want to have an open conversation about, like, is this going to end in 2018? So I'll start off, and anyone can feel free to jump in and answer this question if you feel really passionately about it. But how can we ensure that women aren't just a trend or a marketing campaign?
I'll go ahead and start. First of all, it's so refreshing to look out at this audience. My first OR show was in 2012, and this did not exist. I felt so out of place. I was like, oh my God, what am I doing here? And I think everybody was like, thought I was a crazy woman talking about women in the outdoors. So first of all, thank you guys for being here. And this is a sign of change, so I want to acknowledge that. I have the same concern that women, we become this trend. There's all these amazing hashtags and campaigns coming along. The reality, as Jen said, as we kicked it off, women have been a part of this industry forever, right? We make up half of the outdoor participation. We're the fastest growing across every category. And I want to say that there's equal responsibility here to make sure that we're not a trend, right? So we're not going anywhere. We're here to stay. And we have this awesome opportunity right now to leverage the momentum that's happening to do a couple of things, because women in the outdoors is not just from a consumer perspective, it's also like internal, right? So how do we get more women into leadership roles and everything else? So how do we boost the pipeline of women going through? How do we boost mentorship to make sure that there's more women that get elevated and to these higher level roles? How do we mentor up and coming entrepreneurs as well, so that they're on the stage here eventually? This is just the beginning. And so what I can say to make sure that we're not a trend is that everyone here and everyone up on the stage takes the responsibility to ensure that we're not, and that's for men and women. So that's for the men that are running a lot of the, if you look at executive level roles, they're predominantly male dominated. That's making sure that when you're making business decisions, that it's not just based around a campaign, that's around promotion also. So it needs to be both consumer facing and internal facing, so that we're living what we preach and what we're telling our customers we're doing.
Anyone else have?
Yeah, I was gonna say, mine's on a more of a personal note. Obviously, I'm growing a kid currently, and she happens to be a baby girl. And so this is something I've thought a lot about lately, because my husband and I, that guy, are going to be bringing a girl into this world, and I really, really hope that she grows up to be a strong, independent woman in the outdoor industry. If she hates it, that's okay too. But I don't want her to come into a world where, women in the outdoor industry is a buzzword that just went away. And like she said, that's on us. We can't let that happen. And the only way to not let that happen is to simply not let it happen. I think it's as simple as that. You have to raise the next generation to know what they're getting into, to be prepared for it, and to not be scared of it, quite honestly.
Yeah, I'll just add something really quickly. So if you look back in the early 70s, when there were Title IX programs that were rolled out, that really did a lot to help women progress. And then the next step of that in today's world, because I have two daughters too who are both teenagers, is really taking them to the outdoors and participating in the outdoors, because if you start that excitement about the outdoors when they're really young, they're going to carry that with them all through adulthood. There are fantastic organizations out there, nonprofits, that are really focused on taking young women into the outdoors and building that self-confidence and self-esteem. And the more that we can support organizations like that, the better it will be for women moving forward in the outdoor industry.
Awesome. Well, so on that note, moving forward, what do you women feel like is the biggest challenge facing female leaders today in our industry? How can we face that challenge?
I can probably start with that. I can only speak from personal experience, but I think that because there's so little women in leadership positions, you kind of have to represent the whole. And so you have to be an example and make sure you don't do this or that to represent women in a bad way. So I feel that way on one front, but also from my experience of like being a minority in the outdoor industry, along with being a woman. We obviously Sherpa Adventure Gear is founded in Nepal, and a lot of times people have never met somebody from Nepal or a Sherpa person. And so I often feel that pressure to represent that in a good way, or they've been to Nepal and had a great experience. They've met a Sherpa and they've done all the and had great adventures. And I feel like I have to live up to kind of their expectation of what they've experienced in Nepal. So I think it's in the same way as women is we kind of have the challenge to represent an entire gender and kind of live up to those expectations.
Well, and what's so challenging about that, if we go back to the last question of the marketing campaign, women are diverse. We're not the same. We're very different, and so it's to represent everyone is inherently challenging.
Yeah.
Just the same way that like certain hashtags or these trends, like it doesn't capture all of us. Excellent point.
One of the things that I've thought about in reflecting on this question, I think I struggled somewhat with the question, right? Is there challenges unique to being female that males don't have? I actually invited some of my male coworkers to have this conversation with me last night, and where we landed is that one of the biggest challenges facing all leaders is really fear and self-doubt. I know women, and if I'm talking in generalizations, when men experience fear and self-doubt, there sometimes is an overcompensation of that, and for women it can be retreat. And so the underlying, we share in common fear and vulnerability as people, but sometimes that manifests differently. So as I think about as a woman, how can I continue in spite of fear or self-doubt to show up, to lead in the midst of uncertainty or unknown? Even today, come and speak on this panel, knowing what is this going to be like having a conversation about women leading? What do I think about that conversation? But to trust that in the uncertainty and the nuance of it, you can still show up. I remember my first summer guiding an all-women's team, 21 days in the Wyoming range. I thought, how am I going to relate to 15-year-old women? I haven't been 15 for at least a decade. And a mentor of mine said, the fact that you're asking the question means that you care, and now you just have to show up and figure it out. And I think for us, no matter where we are in this room, I mean, I think of Whitney, neighbor back there. She's interning at Peak Design this summer from Seattle. Last summer we said, hey, come join us at Kamek. And she's like, I have no idea, I haven't done this kind of work before, but I'm going to drive cross country and I'm going to show up and I'm going to work to build this brand. And so I think one of our challenges is, in spite of our fears, showing up, being present, and engaging the opportunity of the moment, even if we don't know where it's going to lead us.
And to that point, I was thinking about this last night too, and again, talking to my husband about it. And it's scary, or for me, it's been really scary, but I feel like being a female in this industry, or any industry, honestly, means you really have to be able to stand up for yourself a lot, and it's sometimes terrifying. And sometimes it's really, really awkward. And I thought of this because, again, I was talking to my husband. We're both here. We both cover a lot of gear, and we both know what we're talking about in that realm. And we had a meeting the other day at the show with a particular brand. And it was actually my meeting. It was the category I was covering. He was coming with me because we had dinner plans afterwards, and logistically it worked out better that way. And we went into the meeting, and the gentleman running it basically assumed that Will was the one there. And all the questions were directed to Will. All the information was directed to Will. And he's just, I mean, for lack of a better word, he was just there because we had dinner plans afterwards. And he politely kept trying to turn the guy back to me, since I was the one that was actually scheduled the meeting and was the one writing about the topic. But I didn't stand up for myself. I just kind of watched it happen, and we talked about it on the way back. And I was like, what do you do in those situations? Because it would have been awkward as hell to be like, hey, look at me, I'm over here. But sometimes I feel like that's what you have to do. Maybe not quite in that style, because it's probably not going to go over well. But for me, that's been one of the hardest parts, is sometimes you have to say the things that are uncomfortable or awkward, or stand up for yourself in a way that you wish you didn't have to.
Yeah, and one of the things that made me think of is challenging our assumptions. We all have biases in any situation, and so I remember the first time we showed up at OR to build a booth, it was just assumed that the guy on my team with a massive beard had construction experience. They're like, here's the hammer. And they're like, here's our Home Depot list. And I was like, okay. And I realized in that it's not the men's fault on my team. It's just these assumptions we have that, like, you know how to build and you don't. And I, as a woman who is leading a company, have my same assumptions about people who show up in my office and my team. And so to reflect on what's the underlying question, what's the assumption that someone may have, and how can I work constructively to raise that to the surface so that we can work constructively from there. So maybe the question is, hey, who here has construction experience? Who here wants to go to Home Depot? And just stepping back and challenging our assumptions.
just on that challenge question a little more, I'm curious from the audience, and feel free to just like shout out a key word, what some of the challenges you've faced as leaders in the industry are.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mansplaining, children. I love both of those things.
Anyone else? Feel you can add more during questions too.
Lack of eye contact. Communication.
Well, you're up next.
Yeah. I was repeating all of that so that the interwebs could hear all of you, by the way. I was told to make sure. Okay, so as entrepreneurs, as people who have careers, a lot of times we can get really stuck in the day-to-day, right? Like we just put our heads down and we just need to get it done. And we don't necessarily take the time to be able to think about the future. So I want to take that time now for all of us to consider sort of like this big vision for women in the industry. What could this industry look like with more women leading the charge?
I'll go ahead and kick off. I mean, the reality is there's like tons of data across any industry that, you know, the more diverse company you have, board, leadership team, the more innovation you have, the more efficiency you have, the more revenue you have. And so if this industry is to thrive and not survive, but to thrive, it owes it to itself to elevate the presence of women across all aspects of the company. And that's just good business practice. In terms of the future of just women, I think it spans outside of the industry, but let's think of our community, because it's not just the women here that work in the space, but it's the women that play in the space. The outdoors and adventure has the power to change lives, and we're all passionate about it, and that's why we're here. And it's our responsibility to sprinkle that out to the world, and particularly women. It has so much benefit to like have this, what you know, the confidence you feel outdoors, to bring that into your everyday life. It should not be two separate things. I often say that adventure is not something you do, it's a way you live. And so we can bring that into our companies, we can bring that into our communities, and that really starts driving like global change. It's not just localized change.
Anyone else want to talk about the future? Should we move on? Jenny, you look
Well,
like
I
you want
guess
to say something.
so I'll just add this in. You know, when you look at from an economic impact, and when you're talking about business, I think you have to look at the impact of the economic impact in the bottom line. Is that you look that women control about 70% of the purchasing behavior, and they comprise about 50% of our population. And those are really two strong statistics in going forward with any company, saying, look, you have an opportunity to influence 70% of the purchasing power within our industry. And that's incredibly compelling for someone's bottom line, because women don't only make decisions for themselves. It turns out they actually make the decisions for the children in the family, and many times for their husbands as well, or their partners. So it's just really good business practice to be able to listen to that kind of data and to listen to women within an organization to help drive that to the bottom line.
Absolutely. And I'd just like to add from sort of a non-economic standpoint too, my experience in this industry, being able to work with other women, I have some of the best friendships I will ever have because I am a woman in the outdoor industry, and I only met those women here. And I've been able to develop incredible relationships with a lot of women in this room, and the amount of joy that I have in my life because I'm surrounded by rad women. That's what the future could look like. Like we could just live in a happier, healthier, more joyful world. And so just that women are rad. It's incredible.
I tell you, hearing
Go ahead.
stories from women and the incredible things that they accomplish in this space is so incredibly inspiring. Like the first woman to climb Mount Everest, to someone who biked close to 100,000 miles within a year. I mean, it's just, it gets me really excited. So,
The first word that came to my mind when asking the question how it looked different was inclusive. And I was looking at some data. So of Fortune 500 companies, less than 5% of the president or CEOs are women. And in the outdoor industry, we're boasting 20% right now of prominent brands in the industry. So that's a start. We get to celebrate that. This industry is spirited, it is spunky, and we get to lead the charge for a lot of industries of what does it look like to embrace women, not as marketing campaigns, but as leaders, as participants, as contributors, and what does it look like to embrace all diversity and to raise up men to be leaders at the same time that we raise up women, because it's not a fixed pie, we can grow it together. And the worst thing that can happen is the pendulum swing to where we elevate women and then we have a vacuum of male leadership. The dropout rate for men in secondary education right now is at an all-time high in urban environments. Like, there's opportunity for us to work towards these things together, celebrating men and women. So I'm excited for an inclusive future of this industry that can set standards for other industries nationally and beyond.
And that really dovetails, that dovetails perfectly into the next question that we want to get into, is that one of the uncomfortable conversations that sometimes we have is that, you know, as women in the industry, we have a lot of comments and feedback and critiques. But at the end of the day, we know that we can't move our agenda forward if we're not inclusive and if we're not bringing men to the table. And I always like to say that it's not the penis, it's the patriarchy, right? So thinking in that line, like, what can we all do? I said that out loud, yeah. In case anyone was listening. What can we do to bring men to the table and to engage with men as allies?
I'll go ahead and kick off. I often say that male champions have been wonderful to me and helped me find my path, and given me sometimes the confidence when I haven't had it myself. And so I think, like, bringing them to your table, like inviting them and actually being like, hey, you're successful. You've done something I want to do. Like, share that with me. Like, and then educate them. Sometimes I think not all men are super aware of all the challenges we do face. So I think it's like a dual conversation. All I can share is what's worked for me in my personal experience. And I loved your comment of you can't leave one side off the table and just focus on one and vice versa. But I think this goes for anyone, you know, bringing men to your table or being inclusive of men or anyone from other race, genders, whatever it is. It's find your champions to share knowledge. It's an education process. It's a topic of assumption. You can't assume that somebody understands your challenges and that they're acting a certain way towards you because of that. They may actually not just be aware. Change happens with awareness. So this is like a first step, and I always just start off with that. Like, don't go into a conversation assuming that somebody knows where you're coming from. You might not. They might not.
Yeah. I got excited about something you said, and that awareness is fostered by conversation, right? This is a one-way conversation. Do this afterwards. I think Amanda asked the question, what are some of the issues you've struggled with? You said eye contact. You said mansplaining. I bet you the people who you feel like you've experienced that from aren't aware. So what would it look like to have the courage and say, hey, can we chat about something real quick? And I bet you'd be met with, I hope that you're met with a, hey, wow, I was not aware. And so it comes down to communication, open communication. Ultimately, we are people. We get to love people as people, and that requires us being willing to take risks, be vulnerable, talk. So I'll pause there.
Well, and listening, it's all kind of like rolls
Listening,
right
yes.
down the roll. Listening, because that's what we're asking, right? Like, when women start having these conversations, they're really asking people to listen to them. But sometimes when you get into those really, really feisty conversations and you get all, it gets all hot and feisty and whatnot, people stop listening because they get stuck in their opinions and their impressions and their way is right way. We've all seen it happening with the current political situation. Not going down that road, but I think people get stuck in their ideas and preconceived notions and they quit listening. And once that happens, everything's done. You're not going to make any progress either way. And just like we're asking people to listen to us, you can't forget to listen to the whole rest of the population, because everybody has something to say and everyone feels differently and it all matters. And it's all part of this big pizza we're talking about. So
Sounds good, right?
And sometimes I think like we get so caught up in expressing our point of view that we're almost talking past each other. Mm-hmm. And it's really just about finding common ground. I think in every situation, you can distill a lot of controversial subjects down to some basic nuggets, and at the end of the day, you'll find some common ground. It may be something as simple as, I want to make the world a better place for my children to live in. Something as simple as that. And starting at that point and then building from there. And so everybody, regardless of your background, your gender, your race, there's going to be something common there, and that's really a stepping stone.
Yeah, I think for me, it's also not necessarily, we're asking for to be treated equally, and so it's not drawing a line in the sand and saying, okay, it's me versus you. And so for us, I think it's great that we're saying it is having that conversation. It's because I do think a lot of people are unaware of how they're reacting or how they're speaking to you or what they're saying and doing. And so I think it's just leveling the playing field and being treated as equal and not saying it's us against you. Yeah.
So one of our next questions is, well, what does measurable success look like? And before we kind of go to the whole panel, I've been reflecting over here on what all these lovely ladies have been saying, and one of the things that GEORGINA said that really resonated with me was, it's just as important when a male leader recognizes what you're doing, how amazing that is. And I was thinking to myself, wow, sometimes I think that when a male leader recognizes something that I'm doing is really important, that's more valuable to me than a female leader doing that. So that's like an internal thing that I need to watch what measurable success looks like to me, because shouldn't we value what the female leader thinks just as much? And that's something that I'm still doing to myself. So me changing that mindset is some measurable success for myself. I'm curious what you guys think for yourself or the industry or anything.
Yeah, I mean, I think for a measurable success from an industry perspective, the data will show itself in leadership numbers, right? And so, and to fuel that, I brought up the topic of mentorship. It's not something that just happens. Like, you have to set up systems in place and maybe even like change the current system and the way of working. And that's going to be different across every company because every company operates differently. I think for me personally, through having male champions and understanding that they didn't have a good understanding of my challenges, it's changed how I communicate with people. And just being like we were talking about earlier, being like transparent up front, like these are my concerns, or these are the challenges I've been having, how would you address that? I think for us as women, like what the future change looks like that's measurable, it's us continuing to support one another. And there is this dynamic that you brought up of like whose opinion do you value more, but also like a comfort level too, right? So I am very comfortable having male champions and mentors and things like that, but I know I've encountered endless amount of women, all ages, that don't have that same comfort level. And so it's also like our community, our mindset changing a little bit around we have to start viewing each other as equals. And that spans different things. That's just not like getting paid the same amount. That's not just having the same amount of leaders. That's also like just seeing each other as human beings and kind of tearing away those like preconceptions of like what male is, what female is, or any gender, or any race, or anything is.
I think measurable progress is, this panel's title is, let's talk about climate change, public lands, and brand collaboration, and we're up here. And so by that, we're asking different questions, and not to say that this isn't progress and we aren't in a moment where this conversation is important, but measurable progress to me is that we are now asking different questions. 2 years ago in Venture Out, Alyssa Ravasio, she runs Hip Camp. She's an incredible woman. There was a panel on brand collaboration, and it was men, all men, which is it's fine. That can happen. That could happen. But she wrote a sign that said "Women collaborate too," kind of like ran across the panel. And the next year there was a woman on the panel, and now we have a panel of women. And so we are making measurable progress. And I think to come alongside and champion what is happening, knowing that progress is the conversation changing and evolving.
But I agree with you. The progress will be when the topic is about collaboration and it's all women. And it doesn't matter, just like it was all men and no one thought about it. So.
Yeah. Or when men lead. I mean, I wouldn't mind going to that panel, but that might be controversial, so I don't know.
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would just, it's basically eliminating the need for this panel because we've basically gotten to that same playing field. But at the same time, let's do the work to get there, right? It's progress, but let's keep doing that work.
Well, and part of the reason why we have a panel like this, let's be honest, when we look at all the other panels that happen at OR and beyond, we don't see equal representation of women as keynote speakers, as panelists. So the reason why we're seeing all women is because we took it into our hands to say this must happen. So measurable change would be that we're not the ones who are responsible for getting women on stage, and instead it just becomes normal that you have men and women together, and just humans, gender's fluid, right? So humans get to be on panels.
I think when you think about successful people to put on a panel, just as many women come up in your head as men. And I honestly, if we all thought about that right now, would you say that happens?
No, for sure.
Any other thoughts? Should we go on to the next question?
Sure. So this is the last question, and then we're going to open it up for some Q&A from the audience. You each get 30 seconds, and if you could give one piece of advice to other women in this audience, what would it be?
Never marginalize yourself. If you truly believe in your heart you can do something, it sounds cheesy, but actually go do it. There's a couple, it's kind of a loaded question. It's not gonna be 30 seconds, sorry. So don't marginalize yourself. Set your own value. If you're being undervalued, speak up. If you're being undervalued in your role and you don't see a way that you can progress and grow, leave, find a better opportunity. You owe that to yourself. Your biggest champion is going to be yourself. You're gonna have, if there's a path you want to take and you don't see a direction there or how to get there, start breaking trail and find people that will walk alongside you and help you do that.
So it's pretty simple for me. It's like you've got to follow your passion. You are always going to run into challenges and obstacles and self-doubt. And if you're not following your passion, it's going to be so easy to say, oh, I give up. But if you're following your passion and you truly love what you're doing, people are going to see that. And they're not going to see you as a woman. They're not going to see you as anything else. What they're going to be doing is listening to your words and what you're saying and the data that you're presenting. And so that's follow your passion. Yeah.
I would say, really, you can have it all. You can have a career, you can have a family. I have a 2-year-old. I travel probably 2 weeks out of the month of the year. And people always ask me, how do you do it? It takes a village, but you can do it. I don't think it's an either or, and to not feel guilty if you choose your career sometimes over your family because you love what you do and you're passionate about it. And I would say also own your accomplishments. I think that we often tend to kind of put our head down, and we were just talking about this before, but we put our head down and kind of just do our work and don't really think about kind of the competitiveness or kind of the accomplishments that we're actually doing and what we're achieving. And so I'd say, just own your accomplishments and support one another.
I would say don't let yourself get intimidated because we all run into stuff that we get scared from, and I think all too frequently let ourselves get in our own way. And sometimes you really just have to close your eyes and go. And 9 times out of 10, it's going to work out well. There's always going to be the bumps and bruises from the one time. But more often than not, that's when you're going to make some pretty cool stuff happen. And it just takes a little suppression of that fear, of that intimidation. And that's when you really start to push your limits.
To echo Heather, I would say show up in spite of yourself. Ask for help. I am here because people have helped me. I can be, we have all received help. And so in that vein, I would find a mentor, find someone who will champion you, and then find someone to champion, find someone to believe in, because that will do more for you than anything else. And show up.
And I'm going to add to this, and Amanda, I'd love to hear from you too, for your 30 seconds. My advice to everyone is to get really clear on your values and be unapologetic about it. So for me, I'm a feminist. I believe in supporting women. I believe in calling things out when they need to be said, and I will never apologize for that. And I think that a lot of times we apologize and we feel bad for the uncomfortable conversations, and we don't say what we need to say because we want people to like us or to not dislike us. So be okay with maybe not everybody loving you all the time.
So along with that, sorry, just to add in, don't be afraid to ask. It's just ask. Whether it's asking for that promotion, asking for a pay raise, and if they say no, saying, okay, what do I have to do in order to get that? But don't be afraid to ask. I think as women, as you said, like we tend to hold ourselves back and say, well, of course they're going to promote me because I've done all these fabulous things. And then you get looked over. So don't be afraid to ask. Go in there with all your data and show, I deserve this.
You don't get what you don't ask for.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think my advice would be don't be afraid to break the rules. Don't be afraid to not know what the rules are and just do your own thing. I started a creative shop having worked at an ad agency previously and kind of knowing the rules and kind of not, and I just went for it. So if you know what you want to do, who cares what the rules are? Change them and pave your own path. So.
Excellent. Thank you. So we're going to move into Q&A with the audience. If you do have a question, I'm going to ask that you use the mic because this is being recorded, so the mic's here. While we're doing this, we're going to pass around these 2 hats. If you want to be entered to win some hats, some water bottles, a Wild Women's Project trip, and some coalition skis, drop your business card or your name and email into the hat, and we'll just pass that around.
And we'll be giving away the water bottles and hats today at the end of this, and the skis and the trip tomorrow, and you have to be present to win at the end of our workshop tomorrow. So.
Okay, so who has a question for any of our panelists?
Let's see.
We'll go here, and then we'll come here, and then Lindsay, you're next. We'll get you.
Hi, so I have a question. I feel like ever since I found a backbone and started standing up for myself, I have now been completely labeled as this extreme feminist. And now I am no longer taken seriously because I now have this label and I no longer blend in. I'm completely segregated from the rest of the crew because I'm just the feminist. Of course she would ask that. Of course she would have that opinion. So how do you stand up for yourself and still blend and still find, like, have respect, you know? Like, I don't feel like that respect is there anymore because I've just been labeled. So now they don't take me as seriously because I'm just
start
a feminist.
with that, and then my response would be, let's change the definition of feminism. And we all have to do that together, men and women. So.
I want to talk about a lot of that transparency and that calling people out bit. Like, this is where conversations get uncomfortable. And, I'm a nice human being person, but like when stuff like that happens and like I'm bringing value to a conversation and that value is not being recognized, then I'm very happy to say, let's talk about that. Like, let's talk about my question and why it's categorized all of a sudden in this bucket. Like, does this not impact our business? Does this not impact our customer base? Like, tie it all back to a business case. And that's always been my workaround. And then sometimes if they still don't get it, then it gets more uncomfortable. And then you'll have to decide, how far you want to push. But sometimes if you don't actually call people out, and you could do that in a nice way, in a respectful way, and again, honing in on your value and what you bring to the table and the value of your question or your challenge, then you're going to keep, kind of facing that again. I don't know if you want to add to that.
I would say ask for feedback. I think sometimes if we lead in humility, and I don't know you at all, right? I'd want to get to know you and like to actually have this conversation, but there will be people who may never respond in the way that you hope to be responded to, and so there's kind of a discernment of how to engage and who to engage. Where can I have this conversation in a productive way and start there? And then if you're still meeting resistance, ask for feedback. And then if you're still meeting resistance, like maybe have the courage to move to a new situation or environment. But I think inviting the dialogue back, because you may be unaware of ways where there's something in how you're saying it that they aren't able to listen to, and a simple question could break that down. Because like you said, there is value in what you're bringing. It just may not be heard. So if you can help to break through why it's not being heard, like you can lead in that. But again, this is not knowing you and your specific situation, but appreciate the question.
I just want to add one more thing. I'm sorry that that's your experience, because that's unfair that any woman who stands up for herself would be treated like that. Like that, once again, I don't know you, I don't know this scenario. It sounds a bit unhealthy, maybe there's some people that you don't need to spend time with anymore. You know, so let's go over to Lindsay here. Can we get the mic?
Yeah, I've got it.
Oh, you got it. Great.
My question actually is similar. You know, how do you guys suggest dealing with conflict? Any techniques with bringing up hard things? I think as women, you know, we've talked about this a bit, but we're taught to not ruffle feathers. We're taught to be agreeable. So obviously in an entrepreneurship situation, you're going to have to deal with that. And do you have any suggestions on how you guys have done it?
I go back to the transparency piece, and we had a long conversation today. And Jen, you brought this up in our talk at She Ventures, right? It's being unapologetic sometimes, and then also the value piece, and also like getting comfortable with not everyone's gonna love you. Like that's like been one of the hardest things that I maybe have had to learn as an entrepreneur, as a leader, is inviting an open dialogue, because sometimes conflict can come from a lack of understanding. So if you at least try to do that and then you're still not able to address it, it's always communicating your value and where you're coming from. And if you still can't see eye to eye with somebody, the reality is we're all such different human beings and we have different value systems and things like that. And so I've definitely ended conversations saying, let's agree to disagree. Or I think our heart's in the right place and our intention's in the right place, but how we're going about solving this is different. And I don't know that we're ever gonna get there. And in others, it's just like oil and water, you know, and just being like, not everyone's gonna see your side. And that's the unfortunate thing. I think that's a hard thing, is to accept that not everyone's gonna like or value you regardless of what you do. And that's not a super positive ending to the answer, but it's a real one.
Well, I think the other thing is being empathetic, is trying to put yourself in their shoes and understand where they're coming from, because they might be carrying some baggage that you have no idea about, and trying to understand, okay, where are you coming from, and talking that through and saying, I sense that there's some friction here. Where is that coming from? How can we work this through? Because if we can work together better, we're going to end up with a better situation. So coming at it from that angle, just really trying to understand where they're coming from. And to your point, it might be something you can't resolve, but in most cases, I find that you can ultimately find a way of working together rather than just like a bunch of negativity, just finding out where you can integrate.
I can only speak from personal experience, but I think knowledge is power. It's being open to learning and going the extra mile if you're really passionate about it and want to prove yourself. That's how, for me, I've gained my confidence, is being really open-minded to learning from people, because you're always going to be the student. You're never going to be the teacher.
That's really good.
And that's something I've learned from my parents. And so that's really helped me in my career, I think, and gain respect from people that, I didn't come from the outdoor industry. So to gain respect from people that have spent years in the outdoor industry and to be at the table and have those conversations, is I'm really open and always willing to learn and never feel like I'm the master and trying to say that I'm the best at this, or, I know everything about X, Y, Z. And that's really helped me gain my confidence. And when you come to the table with confidence, there's not a lot that can be questioned, really. And so that's what's really helped me personally.
Yeah. And what I was going to say earlier is, this is something personally I struggle with. It probably is my number one problem, what you described. I'm a really sensitive person, and I take so many things personally that have nothing to do with me. It's just how I am. And so running a website, or now that I have a book with Amazon reviews, like, oh my gosh, I'm like, I can't read my reviews because I'm going to freak out. I get one good one, one bad one. I focus on the negative. And I've had to accept that sometimes, like you said, oil and water, sometimes it's just not going to work out. Like, none of us are liked by everybody. None of us are going to get along with everybody. And I try to remind myself, it's so easy to say that. It's entirely different in practice, though. But sometimes you're just not meant to get along with this person, or maybe, you just needed to hear that differing opinion because it's going to lead to something else later on. It's going to sting at the time, but that's part of the growing process. But sometimes it's just going to have to be something that stings, it hurts, and you move on,
I agree with the just not having feedback constantly, but and not being sensitive or trying to react to that. I think it's okay to be sensitive. But and I don't know if you're talking personally, professionally, I think realizing that ultimately our organizations are going to thrive or not based on the quality of how we interact and how we communicate and how we resolve conflict. Conflict is inevitable. And so something I've always tried to focus on is how can I focus on the behavior, not the person, and how it makes me feel, and give that person an opportunity to engage around the behavior to take it away from the person. I would also talk to your leadership or your boss or mentor and say, how can we build communication or conflict training into our team environment? We recently did a workshop as a team that just broke down a tremendous amount of barrier because we were all given the opportunity from a facilitated person to be vulnerable. And since then, we've communicated much more clearly together. And I'm drawing a blank, but there's a really great book recently. I might be called Feedback as a Gift. But what would it look like for your whole team to read it and then talk about it, and for you to lead in that vulnerability? Say, hey, I don't think I'm the best at managing conflict, and I think we could all do a better job. Let's try this. Because, I think it's always worth the additional effort to meet somebody in that relationship and try to solve it, realizing sometimes there will be an inevitable impasse.
I think all of these are really valuable advices, and I just want to point out, because I like reading between the lines a lot, that it's incredibly fascinating that we have a panel called When Women Lead, and we spend 5+ minutes talking about vulnerability and conflict. I don't really think that men would talk about that in leadership as much, and I think that we can use that as a strength in women leadership roles, and really use that to become more empowered when we're in power, and use it to our ability. So reflecting on that and thinking, how can we not just answer the question, but how can we use that to strengthen our leadership in the industry?
Hi. First of all, taking a lot of notes. Thank you very much. I am Deanne Buck, and I'm the executive director of Camber Outdoors, and we've had some really great conversations about this panel. And one of the things I just like to kind of ask is, Camber, at the request of our members, which were women in the industry, launched a CEO pledge where we asked our member companies to commit to women's leadership as a strategic initiative for their company. And I think looking at the collective energy and power in this room, what would it look like for all of us to hold our own companies and the companies that we're seeking gear from to support us in our endeavors, to collectively hold them accountable to the CEO pledge and say, we're not willing to work with you until you have committed to women's leadership in your company.
Sorry. Clapping from afar. I'm totally, yeah. So I talked a little bit about that earlier, but it's like that mutual responsibility, right? Like, things just don't happen. It'd be really awesome if things just work out the way we want and fall in our lap. But a lot of the times, if you're not getting what you want, and we brought this up, you have to ask for it. And so if there's this growing momentum here to have more support for women in the industry, and we have an organization that's providing amazing support, then something everyone here can do is do exactly that. Go to your boss and say, hey, there's this awesome organization that has mentorship, that has tools and resources. Can we please have access to that? And that's a really valid ask. And I hope that nobody's met with tremendous amount of opposition.
And I would say too, to Jenny's point that women are responsible for 70% of purchases, we have an incredible amount of power in our pocketbook, and we can shop based on our values. And so if you believe in supporting women and women's leadership, and there's specific companies that would maybe refuse to take part of the pledge, or we know that they don't, they have a hostile environment against women, or they're not, they don't have the diversity that we want to see, don't buy their shit. It's that simple.
I think it'll take time. I am in wild support of what you're doing. And part of me also thinks, could this be problematic if there's positions that are marked as women only? How do we ensure that the talent pipeline can fuel female leadership? How can I, as a woman, not think, oh, there's only one seat? How can I say, you are so much better than me at this, male or woman, you take the lead at our company in this. We are 50% female at CAMIC. I was asked to be CEO by a founder who's a man and leads with incredible servant leadership. And so there's absolutely opportunity. I'm a firm believer in we will hire the best person for the job. And so how can we as companies be supporting the places where people are getting groomed for those jobs to have a more diverse and robust pipeline? So I absolutely love the aim. I think we should be working towards that at a root level, more so than just hiring women into positions because of diversity's sake, which I don't believe that's the intent absolutely whatsoever, but just want to make sure that we're addressing things at the root cause.
Well, women don't need charity. We're not charity cases. We don't need like specific positions created for us, like, oh, you know, I'm showing up with a vagina, so now I must have this position. Women bring enough skill and enough resources to the table that we are as competitive as anyone else, right? So to be really clear that I'm here and I have this position and I have this title because of my skill set.
Yeah, and ultimately respect is earned for anyone through our consistent actions over time and our character, not any qualifier or attribute that we may lead with. And so that's what we have to do. We have to keep showing up. We have to keep leading with integrity, and over time there will be room at the table.
I just want to just chime in a little bit on the pipeline piece, because I think that's really important. And after being a part of the Future Leader Academy with OIA and seeing the mentorship presentations through Camber, I really want to stress that those tools and resources to help groom people through that pipeline, and that goes for women, diverse groups, everyone, that needs to be improved. I think that's recognized in the industry, because just merit alone, a lot of people are working really hard, but they need additional tools and resources to get to that next level. And so that's why these types of programs and resources become incredibly important, because if we do want our industry to change and look different, that pipeline has to start to look different. And that starts early. That's like where we're recruiting out of college. That, like, it goes deep. You know, it's not something that's just going to be solved like today in 5 minutes.
Hi, I'm Gina. I work at REI. My question starts with a little bit of a story. So this past year has been a huge learning experience for me. I was working my way up at REI, and my store manager and I were talking, and one of the statistics that he mentioned was men are sometimes only 60% sure before they take a risk, whereas women wait until they're about 100% certain. And I was wondering, have you guys ever dealt with a time where you took a risk and you weren't 100% certain, and did you either fail and learn from that experience, or did you succeed and gain more confidence in that? Because that's something that I've experienced in the past year, and I took those risks, and now I feel like I'm definitely growing more, and it's been a huge confidence booster for me.
Every damn day.
Every
damn day. Risk taking, succeeding, and failing.
I kind of want to jump in. So my previous background was in management consulting, so I saw a ton just from like client perspective of that statistic coming to life every day. Personally, I'll share a story. When I was 27 years old, I wanted to apply for my first consulting job, and a friend was an account manager there, and she was like, I go, can you refer me in? She's like, well, this firm has no female consultants and no one under 40, so I'll happily like submit your resume, but I don't think you're gonna get the job. And I said, cool, just submit my resume. That's actually all I want you to do. And she did, and I made it through like 9 rounds of interviews, and I got the job. And so just go for it. What do you have to lose? Like, if you already think you're not gonna get the job, what are you gonna get by not applying?
Right.
So, and all women need to learn this, because the stat is so real, and I've mentored so many women in this space, and whether it's a job or like starting a company or anything else, ask yourself the question, what's the worst that can happen? And usually it's not that bad, and I hope that gives you some courage to just go and try. And if it's a job, also, like, you know people that work there or friends of friends that work there, ask them to put in a good word or have coffee with them, like, you know, just kind of start carving that path.
And this goes back to what I was saying earlier. Don't let yourself get in your own way. Bottom line, you can't let yourself do that to yourself, you know.
And I can tell you, coming from an entrepreneurial background, because when I started the company, is there are so many times where we've done things just kind of guerrilla-wise, and we always just tell ourselves, well, the worst that they can say is no, or you just go ahead and do it, and then they tell you no later. But it's okay, because you've already done it, and you've achieved your goal. So I like it.
Great. We have time for one more question.
Can we go? Sorry. Can we ask?
Yeah.
Adrian, we can ask a question later. Sorry. So many people.
Hi, my name is Marisela. I'm from Latina Outdoors and currently starting my own adventure as a startup, the Abilities Project.
Woohoo.
And I just wanted to say how amazing it is to see so many champions here, so many advocates, and so many inspiring women. And to answer your question, I don't know where she went from REI, but I spend 70% of my time volunteering and the rest working really hard, and I have 4 jobs, but I still make it happen because I believe in the work that I do. And there have been moments where people play devil's advocate or don't believe in the work that I do, but I know that the work is so valuable, not just to me, but to different communities. And the outdoor space is where we need to change it and diversify the space because every community is lucrative. And if we utilize that, we can go above and beyond. And I appreciate what you ladies do.
Thank you.
I know that's not a question, but I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, Lisa, if you want to go ahead real quick.
Hi, I actually have a question for Haley. I don't actually know you yet,
Hi.
but what you said I don't know, earlier, you talked about championing. I don't know how to say that. But who was someone that championed you, and like, tell me about that story, like that life change, because clearly it had a big change on your life.
Wow.
Or who's someone that you're championing now?
No, I've had so many champions. I think back to my first boss. I think back to someone right now. We just went through a difficult few weeks of business at Kamek, and I had one of our board members say, Haley, people can handle bad news. They can't handle bad behavior. And so just like reinforcing and championing, and I know that I have a lot of stories. I'll share some of the after. I won't bore everyone, but just a lot of champions. Someone that I champion, there's a girl, Kendra Murphy. She was on my wilderness course, and she doesn't have peripheral vision, and she's mostly blind. And we were in the wilderness for 21 days. But I've never seen someone throw herself more wholeheartedly into everything with the most energy. Like, she champions me, and she's 15 years old. I was like, actually, she's championing me. But I remember her looking and being like, Hales, how far is that rock? Because she couldn't see it. And I was like, I think about 3 feet. And then she would just jump. And so I think about her often because we're all kind of walking around half blind. Not actually that, but in a lot, figuratively. And just to be willing to jump and to have somebody beside you saying, hey, here's where you need to stick it. You got this, go. So Kendra's championed me in the same way that I've been able to champion her.
So what Amanda and I have noticed is that every single time that there's a women's panel, we could sit and talk so much longer. We are unfortunately out of time today, but in anticipation of all the incredible conversation that's happening, we will be reconvening here tomorrow at 3:30, essentially just continuing this conversation and looking at, you know, what can happen when women own our power and our leadership. So I just want to say thank you to all of you who took the time to come today, and to all of our panelists.
And we'll be breaking up into really intimate groups tomorrow. So if you didn't get a question answered today, come back tomorrow.
Yes. So before we actually leave, we have some things to give away. Where's the other hat? Oh, thank you. And I want to invite Deanne. Do you want to come back up? We just want to give, I'd like to give Deanne just a moment to tell all of you a little bit about Camber in case you're not aware of their work. Because if we're talking about women leading, we have to have them at the table too. So Deanne, please, and then we'll give some things away. Oh yeah, here we go.
We can borrow mine.
Thank you, Jen. And so Camber Outdoors has been around for about 21 years. Has anyone not heard of it?
Oh, there's a few.
And has anyone ever served on the board? Stand up. We started out as the Outdoor Industry Women's Coalition, and it was started by Ann Kurchek, who is at the North Face, and Carolyn Cook, who founded ISIS. And really, they were at the trade show at Outdoor Retailer in Reno and looked around and said, there just aren't a lot of us. For the first 15 years of our existence, we very much supported women's leadership once you got into the industry, and our members said, we are interested in systematic change, which is why we have evolved our focus in our work. So we still focus on women's leadership, but we have launched the CEO Pledge. And I think it was interesting because the CEO Pledge isn't about putting more women in places. It's about creating the opportunity for our leaders to see places where they bring bias to systems. And those biases are eliminating opportunities for women. So it's not giving women an opportunity because they're a woman. It's giving them the opportunity to actually participate in the process. And so I think one of the things that we can do as an industry is continue to have these conversations, continue to have people like Jen take leadership roles. All of you take leadership roles and say, these conversations need to happen, and they're not, and we need to have a space for them. So I really applaud Jen and Amanda for creating this opportunity for everyone, and I thank you for the opportunity.
You're welcome. Thank you. Okay, who wants to win some stuff? Anybody? All right, what are we starting with, Amanda? What are we giving away first?
A Wild Women's Project hat.
Okay, Mackenzie Newman, you in the house? You still here? Hat, yes, woo! I'm gonna put cards back in for the big grand prizes tomorrow.
The cards will go back in.
Okay, I'm gonna move quickly.
A Coalition Snow water bottle.
Coalition Snow water bottle, Paige Baker. Yes, come on up.
Another Wild Women's Project hat.
Yeah, okay. I already picked you, Mackenzie. You don't get twice. Oh, that's a thick card. Nice. Angie Vermillion. Angie?
Thank you.
Angie's not here, so I must pick another one. Jocelyn Burris. Jocelyn. Yes. All right. Another hat?
Another hat. We've got a few more hats.
Okay. Lisa.
Lisa Slagle.
It doesn't have your name on it, but that's you.
Yeah, I recognize your logo on the card.
Christina Sabilio. Are you around? Yep. Another hat.
Two water bottles over by you.
Oh, yeah. Let's do a water bottle. Emily Reed. Yes, Emily. Abby Bradford.
Abby Bradford.
Woo, okay. Hat, great. Shanti, where are you at? You win.
And
You're
then
welcome.
one more water bottle.
And one more water bottle. And then we'll do a Coalition Snow hat too. Shelly Williams.
Last year. Potentially, because I do some family.
Futures female, Shelly. There you go.
Here.
And
I'll help
let's
you
do.
if you want to pick the last one.
Yeah, we'll do a Coalition Snow hat.
Just his offering. Yeah. Stuck in my face. It's interesting.
Meredith Bell. Here you go. So we hope that you'll come join us tomorrow at 3:30. We'll keep your cards. You can win the grand prizes. We'll continue all of this fabulous conversation. And thank you again, everyone, for being here today.